Hello and welcome to the fourth and final practice for the colored pencil sphere Bellringer unit. I am going to be talking you through this final one today, but I know that on our fourth practice, students sometimes start to not listen as much to the instructions, but I want to remind you that each one of these practices, you should see some improvement from your one before, from your previous sphere. So this final sphere should be improvement from all three of your other practices. And to improve, you have to continue learning, and that means that you are still listening and still following along. So I want you to make sure that as we go through these steps today, that you are doing them with me, not going ahead, and that you are still really listening and trying to apply the things that I'm telling you, because we are adding in a couple little extra things today. Our focus is having smooth texture. So at the end, you're going to ask yourself, does your shading fill in the paper texture completely? So you can see in our example that you can really see those pencil direction lines. You should not be able to see any of the directions that you were coloring in for your final. Now let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with our black. Spin your paper so that its value scale is closest to us. We're going to draw those lines bordering the rectangle, cut that in half once more, and in half once more, which gives us our 8 sections. We're going to spin this back and we're going to number it. So we start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then we're going to spin our paper back towards us. Now for this first part, I really want you to give yourself a border before you start filling this in. And I want you to really take your time and notice if there is a gap on the side or like within your value scale, and you need to fill it completely. I would say one area that students can improve in is making sure that they're not leaving little gaps. That's one way that you can get better. Now we are filling this 7 sections completely solidly. That's burnished. Blow away your dust and make sure that you've got all of those little spots filled in and it wasn't just covered up by crumbs. Next, we are going to start in value 5. We're going to use a flat edge of our pencil, and we are creating the lightest value that we can. We want to help this fade out into value 4 by just making the smallest little circles and just dusting them into value 4. And that's got to be a perfectly smooth transition for that to work well. So we want to make sure we've got that fading out to white super smoothly, the smoothest we can get it. Now we're going to fill in value 6 with a medium tone. So it should be darker than what you did for value 5, but lighter than what you did for value 7. So take a look up at the board here. I have 3 different sections that you can see. To address this first section and to make it look better, I'm adding a small line of circles just right on top of that edge. And I'm using that to help me bridge the gap between these values. I want to have a nice smooth transition. I'm going to do that again so you can watch this here. I'm going to find this line and I'm just going over it with a nice light layer of circles. And if that wasn't enough to bridge the gap, then maybe I need to add in another line and then another line. So I'm just going back through and working on perfecting this texture the best that I can before I come in with my color. And remember that your color does not actually smooth this out, it just reveals if there were errors. So you really need to take your time in smoothing out your value scale portion of this, because that's where all the work is done. That's where you'd help this to have a really good transition. So we want to fade that all the way out to value 4. Now we are going to switch to our color. We're going to fill value 4 completely solidly, so we're burnishing. You can give yourself a border. That's one way that you can really improve, making your craftsmanship even better. Now we've filled in value 4. Next, we are going to burnish all the way back to where it was solid black. So I'm just using rows of little circles, filling in my borders so that it's nice and filled up against those edges. And then I'm just slowly filling it very heavily and solidly all the way back up until it reaches that solid part that was originally black in value 7. Now we're going to transition out to white. So I'm going to hop down to value 1. I'm going to use the flat edge of my pencil, and I'm making the lightest value that I can, and I'm helping it to fade out to white the smoothest way possible. Next, I'm making my medium tones, so I'm starting at that solid section, and I'm just slowly lightening my pressure as I'm working my way down, and I'm just keeping in mind that I want to end right here. So we're just kind of stretching it down so that it lines up right to fade at that spot we created. Remember that when we're filling our darker areas, you want to use the sharp or crispy point of your pencil lead, and if you're filling soft areas, you want to use that flat point. So we're just spinning our pencil around to help us with those tasks. We want to go up against the edge of our value scale at this point and make sure it's completely filled in. Now I'm going to switch to my white colored pencil, and starting on the light end, and always clean it, make sure that you've cleaned off your white always, but we're going to start on this lighter end, and using super heavy pressure, I am just filling all the way back up to where we were solidly filling at number 4. So I'm using my white to get rid of any texture that's left behind by filling it in so solidly. Remember that you are able to come back in with your original color and layer, so if you need to go back and complete a couple of touch-ups, you are absolutely able to do that. Next, we are going to spin our paper back, working with our black colored pencil now. We're going to draw our line from the outermost edge of the right of the circle and from the outermost edge on the bottom. We're going to connect those 2 points from our triangle, which gives us our highlight slice. Then we've got this little part that's going to come up just a little bit above the tabletop and drop down to that first point. That gave us our triangle that we are shading in, so we're going to do that with our black. Remember that we do not start out with solid black. We are using a darker medium, probably like a 6, and then fading out so that it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. Next, we are going to fill in the value transition for our highlight space, which is just kind of starting on the right where we had our darker value, and then just fading this out so it's a nice transition out into this light value. Then we're going to just dust the edges on the top here. We want to just create a small value scale on the top, and we know that we have this eyeball shape that we're trying to create. So we are bringing up along the edge, just lifting this black a little bit so that we can start to create that little eyeball shape. And we want to use the flat edge of our pencil here to help transition out to white as smoothly as we can. And notice that this is not a very large space that's filled in with black currently. We don't want to take up too much with our black because we do still need to bring in our solid color and have that be represented as well. So we are going to switch to our blue, and I like to have you start with filling in that light space. So we are going to go around and on our reference photo, draw this eyeball shape. Now I want you to create a flat spot on your pencil with your color. Use just one spot, don't spin your pencil, just make a very flat spot. Now don't spin your pencil, and note where this eyeball starts. So I'm just kind of drawing in this line with like very light circles. Now it ends here, so I'm going to just kind of come around and draw that little edge, the eyeball shape where this is fading. This is nice to have at this point. It's a little bit different from what we've done, but I think it might be helpful in helping you understand the transition out to white a little bit better. So now that we've got this line drawn in nice and lightly, we're going to start on either side of this triangle and just burnish. So we're filling in the highlight space, then we're going above the triangle and filling in where it was just fading out. And for this section, I want you to give yourself 1, 2, 3 solid lines of blue. Then On the lighter end of the triangle, we'll start over on the left and we're working our way towards the right using just very small circles and very heavy pressure to fill this in so that it has a nice smooth texture. And remember, that is our focus today, so keep those circles nice and tiny. Now we have the task of bridging the gap between our eyeball line that we gave ourselves and this solid line that we filled in. So we want to transition quickly. We are going to use just a nice light medium tone in between these spaces. We don't want to go too much darker since we've got a quick pass we need to make where we're transitioning out. So we are just helping to bridge the gap between our lightest value and our solid color. Now, once we've reached that eyeball edge, we can go through and just kind of like dust around it once more, just to kind of help fade that out to white a little bit smoother. We can get those values added just a little bit lighter into that space so that we have more of a transition. We're just taking our time here. We really want to have a nice smooth transition out to white for that eyeball shape. Now, before you use white on yours, I would like for you to just take a look up at the board and see where mine is at. You can see that we've got a lot of this light value that we are going to come over the top with white. But if you don't have this light value added, then when you come over the top with white, it just makes a very small transition when really we want to have a gradual transition. So take a look here and make sure that compared to this one, you've got enough of the lighter value to actually make this work. Now, I want you to just pause for a moment and just watch this next step. So I'm going to come in with the white, and I wanted to show you, we're going to clean off our pencil and watch this step. We're going to start on the lighter side, and I'm just kind of manipulating that blue or my color to be where I want it to be and then bringing it down. So now you can try it. We're starting on that lighter edge and then just working our way up into this space where it's already nice and solid. So starting on that lighter end, using small circles and working our way into where it's solid. One nice thing is that you can always go back and reapply your color, so you can add in more of that solid color if you kind of lost it when you brought in your white. Now we can layer back some of the white to help smooth it out, but you want to take your time here to really make sure that you've got a nice transition between all of your tones. Next, we are going to fill in our triangle underneath. So I'm turning my paper so I can see when the paper or when my pencil is touching the edge of the sphere. Notice that I brought this shadow line out all the way underneath the sphere to this other edge here. We're filling in the edges of that triangle and then filling the entire triangle solid black. Then we're going to give ourselves the edge of our shadow, which stretches out and curves slightly at the end. We can turn our paper back now, and we're going to just fill this value scale in using vertical lines and pressing lighter and lighter and lighter. So at the end, it becomes more of a medium tone. We need to go back in and perfect. I like to go back through using my sharp part of my pencil lead since this is a darker value that we're filling. You might also soften the outside of your shadow just slightly by giving it a border where it's just a little bit lighter on the outside edge. Now we're going to give ourselves a border in our background space. So I'm coming around the outside of this sphere, making sure it's nice and sharp. I'm always coloring on the right side of my lines. So I spin my paper so I can do that correctly. So we're giving ourselves that border first. It shouldn't be too dark. This is just a nice light gray. And then we are filling, using that flat part of our pencil, filling in just a nice light gray. It does not need to be super dark. We want to use little circles, so try to avoid lines. That's something you can do to help with smooth texture for this practice. And we're just filling that in so that you don't see any of the direction that you were coloring in. Remember, that's one of our focuses, is not being able to see the direction that you were coloring in. The best way to do that is by using circles so that it's multiple directions that you're coloring in. Next, we're going to fill in our tabletop. To do that, I like to give my shadow a little bit of a border. So I'll create that little highlight, border my rectangle, border the shadow, border my sphere, and then I'll fill. Make sure that you're burnishing so you don't see any of your directional coloring. Then I'm giving myself a border around that shadow, and I'll give myself this highlight. I'm gonna just fill in this edge by turning my paper so I can really see when it touches the edge of that sphere. I'm gonna give myself the border going all the way around. I'm making this border quite heavily so that it's all the way filled in and burnished. And now I'm going to burnish the tabletop and fill with small circles. All right, now I'm going to start on the lighter side of my shadow. I want to be careful to color inside of this space and not through this space, because occasionally it will take some of your shadow's darkness and pull it out in line form. So make sure that you're coloring within that space or along it. Next, we're going to give ourselves a border again for our background, and for this border we are pressing very heavily. Go slowly around your sphere. You don't want to accidentally go into that space, especially at this phase where you've worked so hard on your practice. So we're going all the way around our sphere very carefully, pressing hard up against the edge there. Make sure that you really take your time on these indents and corners. You can blow away your dust to see if you have actually filled in those spaces well or not. Sometimes it looks like you have when really it is just a crumb that's sitting there. So I highly recommend blowing away your dust to check. We are giving ourselves that very heavy border all the way around that rectangle, filling in our corners nice and neatly. And then our final step is to fill in this background using very small circles and incredibly heavy pressure. So keep those circles nice and small to help you with your smooth texture for this practice. That is our focus today. You might notice at this point that your hand starts to get a little tired. We've been working your hand muscles pretty hard, so you can always shake it out to help your hand muscles relax a little bit. We're just filling in that last little bit. And then our final part of this practice today, because our focus is having smooth texture, I would like for you to look back and see if there are any sections that you have where you can see like patchy, grainy spots that you need to maybe fill in a little bit more. You can look at the outside edges of your space and see if you filled in like all the way up to that line. You can make sure that you don't have any directional lines showing and left behind, and really all it takes to fix all of those problems is just another pass, another layer. So take your time here. This is your final practice, but great job working through all of these different possible problems. Next class, you are working on your evidence of growth. So if you have any questions or if you'd like any help during class today, would be an excellent time to call me over and ask. All right, thank you.